They tell you the moon goddess doesn't make mistakes when she pairs two souls together. They say the Alpha and Luna bond is sacred, built on absolute trust, harmony, and an unbreakable spiritual connection. But they don't tell you what happens when the Luna is a monster hiding behind a beautiful smile, and the Alpha is completely blind to the blood staining her hands. My name is Maeve. For 5 long years, I was the personal attendant to Luna Cassandra of the Redwood Valley Pack. I kept her darkest secrets, and I bore her silver-laced punishments in agonizing silence to protect my family, until the night Alpha Kael finally saw what was underneath my collar. The night the pristine facade shattered, and a respected Alpha didn't just lose his temper, he went entirely, completely feral. To the outside world, the Redwood Valley Pack was a beacon of prosperity and strength. Located deep in the mountainous forests of Oregon, our territory was vast, our businesses were thriving, and our leaders were practically royalty. Alpha Kael was a formidable man, tall, broad-shouldered, with eyes the color of a stormy sea, and a presence that demanded absolute submission without him ever having to raise his voice. He was fiercely protective, known across North America as a fair but ruthless leader. And then there was his mate, Luna Cassandra. If Kael was the storm, Cassandra was the dazzling, flawless sunshine. With her cascading blonde hair, perfect porcelain skin, and a voice that sounded like wind chimes, she was universally adored. The pack worshipped the ground she walked on. She hosted charity galas, funded the pack orphanage, and always remembered the names of the youngest pups. They called her the Golden Luna. But monsters don't always lurk in the shadows. Sometimes they wear designer dresses and smile for the cameras. I was 20 years old when I became her personal attendant. I didn't want the job, but in a werewolf pack, you don't refuse the Luna. More importantly, I couldn't afford to. My parents had been killed in a rogue attack near the border when I was 18, leaving me as the sole guardian of my younger sister Carmen, who was born with a weak heart and a defective wolf spirit. Carmen needed expensive human medical treatments, surgeries that the pack's standard medical fund wouldn't fully cover. Cassandra knew this. She personally offered to pay for Carmen's specialized care on the condition that I bind myself to her service entirely. I thought she was a savior. I thought she was an angel. It took exactly 3 days for the illusion to break. The first time she hurt me, it was over a cup of chamomile tea. I had brought it to her study where she was reviewing guest lists for the upcoming summer solstice festival. She took one sip, her beautiful face twisting into a mask of pure, unadulterated rage. "It's tepid," she whispered, her voice dangerously low. Before I could apologize, she stood up, grabbed my wrist with terrifying werewolf speed, and poured the entire cup of scalding tea over my forearm. I bit my tongue so hard it bled to keep from screaming. As I stood there, trembling, the hot liquid blistering my skin, she smiled. A chilling, hollow smile that didn't reach her eyes. "You will learn, Maeve. Perfection is the only standard I accept in my house. And if you ever tell Cole about my disciplinary methods, I will cut off Carmen's medical funding tomorrow. Let's see how long her fragile little human heart lasts without Dr. Harrison's pacemaker, shall we?" That was the trap. The golden cage had snapped shut, and for 5 years I lived in a state of perpetual terror. Cassandra was a master manipulator. She never left marks where they could be seen. She knew Kael's schedule down to the second. Alpha Kael was frequently away, dealing with border disputes, rogue skirmishes, and pack business in Seattle. When he was gone, the Redwood estate became my personal hell. Her favorite weapon was a heavy, custom-made ring she wore on her right hand. It was beautiful, encrusted with diamonds, but the band was forged from pure, refined silver. For a werewolf, silver is agony. It burns like battery acid, leaving deep, blackened chemical burns that take weeks to heal and leave permanent, jagged scars. Whenever she was displeased, if a dress was ironed wrong, if a message was delayed, or simply if she was in a bad mood, she would strike me, my back, my shoulders, my ribs. They became a canvas of her cruelty, a criss-crossing map of silver burns and bruised flesh. I learned to wear high-collared, long-sleeved servant uniforms, even in the sweltering heat of July. I learned to mask my scent with harsh industrial soaps, so the metallic tang of my healing blood wouldn't alert the pack guards. The head housekeeper, a kind but frail older Omega named Beatrice, knew. She saw me weeping in the laundry room, frantically applying burn salve to my shoulders. But Beatrice was just as trapped as I was, bound by the rigid hierarchy of the pack. To speak out against the Luna without proof was treason. It meant exile, or worse. "Keep your head down, Maeve," Beatrice would whisper, slipping me extra bandages. "The moon goddess sees all. Her justice is slow, but it comes." But as the years dragged on, my faith in the moon goddess dwindled. I was exhausted. My wolf was suppressed, whimpering in the back of my mind, broken by the constant submission and physical trauma. I was fading away, becoming nothing more than a ghost haunting the luxurious halls of the Alpha's estate, living only for the brief moments I got to visit Carmen in the pack hospital, seeing the color in her cheeks and knowing my suffering was keeping her alive. Everything began to unravel in late November, just weeks before the annual Winter Blood Moon Gala. Alpha Kael had been away for 2 months, managing a tense territorial dispute with a neighboring pack in Idaho. The prolonged absence had made Cassandra volatile. Without her mate to ground her, her erratic behavior escalated. My body was paying the price. My back was covered in fresh silver welts from an incident where I accidentally allowed a florist to arrange the wrong shade of white roses in the foyer. When Kyle finally returned, the atmosphere in the pack house shifted instantly. The moment his heavy, dark SUV pulled up the sweeping driveway, the crushing weight of his alpha aura settled over the estate. It was a suffocating, powerful presence that demanded absolute order. Cassandra immediately snapped back into her role as the doting, perfect mate. She greeted him at the door in a stunning silk dress, throwing her arms around his neck, her scent blooming with artificial sweetness. I stood in the corner of the grand foyer, head bowed, hands clasped tightly behind my back, trying to ignore the searing pain radiating from my shoulder blades. The friction of my stiff uniform collar against the fresh burns was agonizing. "I've missed you so much, my love," Cassandra purred, kissing him deeply. Kael held her, but even from a distance I could see the tension in his broad shoulders. He pulled back slightly, his piercing grey eyes scanning the entryway. Werewolves communicate in subtleties: scent, posture, the dilation of pupils. Kael was a dominant alpha, and his senses were sharper than anyone's. Suddenly, his gaze locked onto me. I froze, my breath catching in my throat. I kept my eyes glued to the marble floor, but I could feel his stare burning into me. "Is everything all right with the staff?" Kyle's deep, gravelly voice echoed in the cavernous hall. "The energy in this house feels off, stale." Cassandra let out a breathless, forced laugh, tightening her grip on his arm. "Everything is perfect, darling. We're just stressed from preparing for the gala. Maeve has been working very hard. Haven't you, Maeve?" "Yes, Luna," I replied, my voice raspy. I bowed slightly deeper. A huge mistake. The fabric of my shirt pulled taut against the weeping silver burns on my upper back. A sharp, involuntary gasp escaped my lips, and I flinched violently, stumbling half a step forward. Silence descended on the foyer. Kyle stepped away from his mate. His heavy boots clicked against the marble as he closed the distance between us. He stopped mere inches from me. The scent of pine needles, ozone, and pure alpha dominance washed over me, making my weak wolf instinctively want to bare her throat. "Look at me," Kyle commanded softly. It wasn't a request. It was an alpha decree. I slowly raised my head. His eyes were narrowed, scanning my pale, exhausted face. He leaned in slightly, his nose flaring as he took a subtle breath. I panicked. I had scrubbed myself with bleach soap that morning, but if the wounds were weeping, the scent of distressed werewolf blood and toxic silver might bleed through. "You look ill, Maeve," Kyle said, his voice dropping an octave. "You're trembling." I am just getting over a mild flu, Alpha," I lied smoothly, a survival mechanism honed over 5 years. "My apologies for my clumsiness. I will return to my quarters." Before Carl could press further, Cassandra was at his side, her delicate hand resting on his chest. "Let her go rest, Kyle. She's no use to me if she faints during the gala preparations." Carl stared at me for a second longer, his jaw ticking. He didn't believe me. I could see it in his eyes. But he nodded slowly. "Go. See Dr. Harrison in the morning." I practically fled the room. Over the next 2 weeks, the tension became unbearable. Kyle was home, which meant Cassandra couldn't openly punish me. But her paranoia grew. She noticed Kyle watching me. He would catch me carrying heavy laundry baskets and tell the guards to take them. He would walk into the dining room while I was polishing the silver, and instead of ignoring me like he used to, he would ask me questions. Small things. How long had I worked there? How was my sister doing? Every interaction sent Cassandra into a silent, venomous rage. 3 days before the gala, Carl left for a day trip to the city to finalize security details. The moment his car cleared the pack borders, Cassandra summoned me to her dressing room. I walked in to find her standing in front of her massive gilded mirror, holding a thick leather riding crop. My blood ran cold. I immediately noticed the tip of the crop. She had modified it. Woven into the leather at the end were thin, jagged wires of pure silver. "Lock the door, Maeve," she commanded, her voice terrifyingly calm. I obeyed, my hands shaking so badly I could barely turn the key. "He's watching you," she said, turning to face me. Her eyes were wide, manic. "My mate is looking at a pathetic, dirty little Omega servant. You've been playing the victim, haven't you? Trying to draw his sympathy. trying to make him smell your pathetic little wounds. No, Luna, I swear, I pleaded, backing away until my shoulders hit the heavy oak door. I avoid him. I do everything you ask. Take off your shirt, she hissed. Please, Cassandra, the gala is in 3 days. I need to be able to serve. She crossed the room in a blur of motion, backhanding me across the face with her silver-ringed hand. The impact threw me to the floor, my lip splitting open, the taste of copper flooding my mouth. The silver burned my cheek instantly. Strip now. I had no choice. Crying silently, I unbuttoned my uniform tunic and let it drop to the floor, leaving me in just my bra. Cassandra grabbed my hair, yanking my head back, and forced me to my knees. You are going to learn your place, Maeve. You are nothing. You are a shadow, and if you ever draw my Alpha's gaze again, I will personally disconnect your sister's life support. Then the whip fell. The first strike across my bare back sent a shockwave of white-hot agony through my nervous system. The silver wires sliced through my skin like a hot knife through butter, leaving trails of burning, acidic fire. I screamed, biting down on my own hand to muffle the sound. She struck me again, and again, 6 times in total. When she was finished, I was curled in a fetal position on her imported Persian rug, gasping for air, the world spinning in and out of focus. My back felt like it was submerged in boiling oil. "Clean this up," she sneered, stepping over me, "and if a single drop of your filthy blood stains my rug, I'll make you lick it clean." I spent the next 3 days in a haze of fever and excruciating pain. The silver poisoning was setting in. I couldn't go to Dr. Harrison. He was obligated to report injuries of this magnitude to the Alpha. I had to rely on Beatrice, who snuck me stolen antibiotics and wrapped my torso in tight gauze. Every movement was torture. The wounds were deep, angry, and infected with silver residue. But I had to endure. The Blood Moon Gala was approaching, and my sister's life depended on my silence. The night of the Blood Moon Gala arrived with a bitter, biting chill in the air. The pack house had been transformed into a winter wonderland. Crystal chandeliers dripped with faux icicles. Hundreds of white candles illuminated the grand ballroom, and the elite of werewolf society gathered in their finest attire. I was assigned to serve champagne to the high-ranking guests. Cassandra had specifically ordered me to wear a new, specialized servant's uniform for the event. It was a beautiful, fitted black velvet dress, but it had a fatal flaw. The back was tightly tailored, and the stiff, unforgiving fabric pressed directly against my fresh, bandaged wounds. Every breath I took caused the velvet to rub against the raw, silver-burned flesh. Sweat beaded on my forehead, and my hands trembled violently as I carried the heavy silver tray of champagne flutes. I was running on pure adrenaline and the desperate need to survive the night. Alpha Kael stood at the center of the room, looking devastatingly handsome in a tailored midnight blue tuxedo. Cassandra was, clinging to his arm, radiant in a sweeping gown of silver and ice blue. They looked like the perfect, untouchable royal couple. As the night wore on, my fever spiked. The room began to tilt. The music, the laughter, the clinking of glasses merged into a deafening roar in my ears. I was losing my grip. The heavy bandages beneath my dress felt wet. I knew with a sickening sense of dread that the silver wounds had reopened and were bleeding sluggishly. Cassandra spotted me from across the room. Her eyes narrowed in disapproval at my pale, sweaty complexion. She subtly gestured for me to come over and serve her circle of guests. It was a death sentence. To walk across that massive floor under Kyle's sharp nose while bleeding out. I had no choice. I straightened my spine, suppressing a whimpering gasp as the velvet tore against a scab, and began the long walk across the ballroom floor. I made it to their circle. I offered a tray to a visiting Alpha from the Montana pack, then turned toward Cassandra and Kael. "Champagne, Alpha, Luna?" I asked, my voice barely a whisper. Cassandra reached for a glass, a cruel smirk playing on her lips. She intentionally bumped the edge of my heavy tray with her knuckles as she took the flute. It wasn't a hard hit, but in my weakened, feverish state, it was enough. The tray tipped. I desperately tried to correct it, violently twisting my torso. The movement caused the tight velvet of my dress to rip painfully against my ruined back. The sudden, explosive burst of pain was too much. My knees buckled. The heavy silver tray crashed to the marble floor with a deafening clatter. Champagne glasses shattered, sending shards of crystal and alcohol flying everywhere. I collapsed onto the broken glass, my hands instinctively flying out to catch myself, cutting my palms. The ballroom plunged into dead silence. The music stopped. Hundreds of eyes turned to me. Cassandra gasped in exaggerated horror. "Maeve, you clumsy, stupid girl, look what you've done to my guest's shoes." I tried to push myself up, to apologize, to scramble away, but my body finally gave out. The silver poisoning and the fever overwhelmed me. I slumped forward, unable to rise. And then I felt him. Alpha Kael stepped forward. The temperature in the room seemed to plummet. He didn't look at the broken glass. He didn't look at Cassandra. He was looking down at me. Because when I had collapsed, the violent twisting motion had caused the thick velvet of my dress to pull tight. And beneath the heavy scent of Cassandra's expensive French perfume, the metallic, rotting, undeniable scent of distressed werewolf blood and toxic silver hit the air. Werewolves can smell fear, they can smell pain, but, above all, an alpha can smell when a member of his pack is bleeding. Kyle dropped to one knee amidst the shattered glass, disregarding his expensive suit. "Kyle, leave her. The guards will drag her out." Cassandra started, her voice suddenly shrill, panicked. She realized what was happening. She rushed forward to grab his arm. "Don't touch me," Kyle growled. It wasn't his human voice. It was the deep, vibrating, guttural snarl of his inner wolf. The sound was so terrifying that several prominent guests took a physical step back. Kyle ignored his mate. He reached out and gently gripped my shoulder to help me up. I screamed. It wasn't a conscious reaction. His large, warm hand had pressed directly onto the epicenter of the worst silver burn from the riding crop. The agony was blinding. Kyle froze. His eyes, normally a calm grey, flashed a brilliant, terrifying gold. His wolf was rising to the surface, completely dominating his human side. He inhaled deeply, his nose hovering near my collarbone. The smell of the blood was unmistakable now. It was seeping through the velvet. "Who did this?" Kyle whispered, his voice trembling with a rage so profound it made the floorboards vibrate. "Alpha, please," I sobbed, terrified of what Cassandra would do to Carmen. "It's nothing. I fell. Lies." Kael snarled. Before I could stop him, before Cassandra could intervene, Kael grabbed the high collar of my velvet dress and ripped. With his alpha strength, the thick fabric tore down the back effortlessly, snapping the zipper and exposing my bare skin to the freezing air of the ballroom. A collective gasp echoed through the grand hall. Several Omegas in the crowd began to weep instantly. My back was laid bare for the entire pack and all the visiting dignitaries to see. It was a gruesome, horrific sight. The fresh, weeping gashes from the silver-wired crop were crisscrossed over dozens of older, jagged scars, burns from silver rings, bruises, lacerations. The thick gauze Beatrice had applied was soaked black with corrupted blood and silver poison. It looked like the back of a tortured prisoner of war, not a pack servant. Kael stared at the ruin of my flesh. His hands hovered over my back, shaking uncontrollably. The golden light in his eyes flared so brightly it was almost blinding. The realization of what had been happening under his roof, under his nose, crashed into him. He slowly turned his head to look at Cassandra. Cassandra was backing away, her face drained of all color. The beautiful, perfect Luna looked like a cornered rat. She held up her hands, the heavy silver ring on her right index finger catching the light of the chandeliers. Kael, my love, let me explain. She is a thief. She is disrespectful. I was only disciplining her, as is my right as Luna. Kael didn't speak. He didn't yell. He simply threw his head back and unleashed a roar that shattered the remaining intact crystal glasses on the tables. It was the sound of an alpha's heart breaking and an alpha's wrath being unleashed. He went completely, monstrously feral. The sound that tore from Alpha Kael's throat was not human. It wasn't even fully wolf. It was the primordial, earth-shattering sound of a soul being ripped in two by betrayal and rage. The remaining crystal flutes on the catering tables violently exploded, raining shards like glittering snow over the paralyzed guests. In the werewolf world, an alpha going feral is a nightmare scenario. It means the human consciousness has completely surrendered to the wolf's most basic, violent instincts. Reason vanishes. Diplomacy dies. Only blood and protection remain. Kael's bones cracked audibly, his massive frame expanding as his muscles bulked with pre-shift adrenaline. His perfectly tailored midnight blue tuxedo jacket ripped at the seams. His eyes were no longer grey, they were a solid, glowing, terrifying gold. The sheer force of his alpha aura slammed into the room, so oppressive that several weaker wolves immediately dropped to their knees, baring their throats in involuntary submission. "Kael!" Cassandra shrieked, her perfect facade crumbling into raw terror. She scrambled backward, her high heels slipping on the champagne-soaked marble. It was discipline. She is a defiant, useless creature. You cannot do this in front of the visiting alphas. Alpha Wyatt, the visiting dignitary from the Montana pack, took a slow, deliberate step back, raising his hands in a universal gesture of neutrality. "This is redwood business," Wyatt muttered to his own guards, pulling them toward the heavy oak doors. "No one intervenes. The alpha is feral." Kael didn't even glance at the fleeing guests. His golden gaze was locked on to Cassandra. He stepped over my trembling body, placing himself squarely between me and the woman who had made my life a living hell. "You put silver on a member of my pack." Kael's voice was a dark, vibrating rumble that seemed to come from the very foundations of the estate. It was barely English. It sounded like stones grinding together. You tortured an innocent under my roof in my name. I am your Luna, Cassandra screamed, trying to invoke the sacred bond, her back hitting a marble pillar. You cannot touch me. The moon goddess bound us. My father, Alpha Rider, will wage war on this valley if you lay a hand on me. Kael closed the distance in a blur of motion too fast for the human eye to track. He didn't strike her. Instead, his massive hand shot out and seized her right wrist, the hand that wore the heavy diamond-encrusted silver ring. Cassandra wailed in pain as his grip crushed her delicate bones. "You are no Luna," Kael snarled, his fangs fully descended, gleaming under the chandelier light. With a brutal, unhesitating motion, Kael ripped the silver ring from her finger. He didn't care that the pure silver immediately seared his own flesh. The smell of burning wolfskin filled the air as the metal reacted to his dominant blood, but Kael didn't even flinch. He squeezed his fist, the sheer, monstrous strength of his feral state warping and crushing the thick silver band until the diamonds popped free and scattered across the floor. He dropped the ruined lump of metal at her feet. Then he placed his bloodied hand directly over the lunar mark on Cassandra's neck. A collective gasp echoed through the ballroom. He was forcefully breaking the pact bond. It was an excruciating, highly dangerous process, usually reserved for the worst traitors. "I, Alpha Kael of the Redwood Valley Pack," he roared, his voice echoing with absolute authority. "Strip you of your title, I strip you of your rank. I sever your connection to the heart of this territory. You are nothing to this pack but a prisoner." Cassandra collapsed to the floor, convulsing as the mystical tie to the pack's life force was brutally ripped from her spirit. She wept, a pathetic, broken sound, but Kael had already turned his back on her. "Guards!" Kael commanded, the words slicing through the silent room like a blade. "Take this female to the silver-lined cells in the deep bunkers. If she speaks, gag her. If she resists, break her legs." 4 heavily armed pack enforcers rushed forward, their faces pale but resolute. They hauled the sobbing, disgraced former Luna off the ballroom floor, dragging her out of the grand double doors. The immediate threat removed, Kael's feral energy abruptly shifted. The violent predator vanished, replaced by a frantic, overwhelming need to protect. He dropped back down to his knees beside me. I was shivering violently, the cold air hitting the raw, weeping nerves of my ruined back. The silver poisoning was reaching my heart, causing my vision to tunnel. I could barely keep my eyes open, but I could feel the intense, radiating heat of Kael's body. "Maeve," he whispered. The guttural snarl was gone, replaced by a broken, terrified gentleness. "Maeve, look at me. Stay awake." He didn't care about the blood. He didn't care about the dirt or the shattered glass. Kael slipped his arms under my knees and around my waist, avoiding my back with agonizing care, and lifted me against his chest. I weakly grabbed the ruined lapels of his tuxedo, my tears soaking his shirt. "My sister," I gasped out, the words tasting like copper. "Carmen. She'll kill Carmen." "No one is touching your sister," Kael swore, his voice thick with unshed tears. He pressed his face into my neck, breathing in my unmasked scent. The bleach and cheap soap had washed away in my sweat, revealing the true, sweet scent of my distressed wolf beneath the metallic tang of blood. He stiffened, a shockwave rippling through his massive frame as he truly smelled me for the first time. "I've got you. I swear on my life, I've got you." With me secured in his arms, Alpha Kael sprinted out of the ballroom, leaving the shocked remnants of his high society gala behind, entirely focused on the fragile life fading against his chest. The pack clinic was a blur of harsh fluorescent lights and the sterile smell of antiseptics. Kyle burst through the double doors, his roar shaking the glass windows. "Dr. Harrison, now!" The older pack physician rushed out of his office, dropping a clipboard in sheer panic at the sight of his Alpha covered in blood, holding a half-conscious servant. "Alpha, what happened to—" Dr. Harrison froze as Kael laid me gently onto a stainless steel trauma table on my stomach. The doctor's eyes widened behind his wire-rimmed glasses as he took in the catastrophic damage to my back. "By the goddess! Is that silver poisoning?" "Fix her," Kyle ordered, pacing the small room like a caged tiger. His eyes were still flashing gold, his chest heaving. "Get the silver out of her blood. Save her, Harrison, or I will tear this clinic down to the foundations. Alpha, you need to step outside. My nurses and I need space to work. The silver extraction process is highly volatile." "I am not leaving her," Kyle bellowed, his fangs extending again. I reached out a trembling, blood-stained hand. "Alpha, please," I wheezed. "Let them work." Kyle stopped. He looked down at my hand, then gently, almost reverently, took it in his massive, warm palms. He pressed my knuckles to his forehead. "I will be right outside this door, Maeve. I am not leaving you." The next few hours were a descent into hell. Extracting silver from a werewolf's bloodstream requires brutal chemical flushings and the painful removal of the corrupted tissue. I faded in and out of consciousness. I remember blinding lights, the sting of needles, and Beatrice's soft voice humming an old Omega lullaby as she held my shoulders down. But through it all, anchored to my fading senses, was Kael's imposing silhouette pacing just beyond the frosted glass of the clinic door, a constant, immovable guardian. When I finally woke up, the blinding pain in my back had dulled to a deep, throbbing ache. I was lying on my stomach in a private recovery suite. The room was dark, save for a small bedside lamp. A heavy, warm weight was resting against my left hand. I blinked, my eyes adjusting to the dim light. Kyle was sitting in a chair beside the bed. He looked entirely wrecked. His ruined tuxedo jacket was gone, his white dress shirt was stained with my blood, and his hair was wildly disheveled. He was leaning forward, his forehead resting against the mattress, his hands tightly holding mine. He was asleep, but even in slumber, his brow was furrowed in deep distress. I shifted slightly, and the rustle of the sheets snapped him awake instantly. Alpha reflexes. He bolted upright, his grey eyes searching my face frantically. "Maeve, are you in pain? Do I need to get Harrison?" "No," I whispered, my throat dry and raspy. I'm okay." Cal let out a long, shuddering breath, burying his face in his hands. The formidable, terrifying leader of the Redwood Valley Pack looked completely broken. 5 years, Kyle said, his voice raw, muffled behind his hands. Dr. Harrison documented the scar tissue. He said some of the burns are half a decade old. She was torturing you the entire time you were in my house." He looked up, his eyes bloodshot. "Why, Maeve? Why didn't you tell me? Why didn't you run?" Tears pricked my eyes. The conditioned fear was still there, a heavy chain around my throat. I couldn't. She made sure of it. "How?" Kyle demanded, his voice cracking. "What could she possibly hold over you to make you endure that?" "My sister Carmen," I sobbed, the dam finally breaking. "Carmen has a defective human heart. She needs constant specialized care. Cassandra promised to pay for it out of her personal accounts. She told me if I ever told you about the punishments, she would cut the funding. She said Carmen would die, and it would be my fault." Kyle stared at me, absolute horror washing over his features. The blood drained from his face. "Her personal accounts," he whispered. He stood up, running a shaking hand through his hair. "Maeve, Cassandra didn't have personal wealth. Her father's pack is notoriously stingy. 2 years ago, I authorized a massive expansion to the Redwood Pack's General Medical Welfare Fund, specifically to cover catastrophic illnesses for pack members and their dependents." My heart stopped. "What?" "I signed the papers myself," Kyle said, his voice turning deadly cold. "Cassandra volunteered to manage the disbursement of those specific funds. She told me she was handling the cases personally to ensure the best care." He looked at me, his jaw clenching so hard a muscle ticked in his cheek. "She wasn't using her money, Maeve. She was using pack funds, funds that rightfully belong to you and your sister, and twisting them into a weapon to enslave you." The revelation hit me like a physical blow. 5 years of agony. 5 years of letting that monster carve into my skin with silver, believing I was sacrificing myself to keep my sister breathing, when the pack had already provided for her. Cassandra had stolen my life for nothing but her own sadistic amusement. I couldn't breathe. A panicked sob tore from my throat, and I tried to curl in on myself, forgetting the bandages. Hey, look at me." Kyle was instantly beside me, his hands hovering, afraid to touch me and cause me pain. "Breathe, Maeve. It's over. I swear to the goddess, it is over." "Carmen," I gasped frantically. "If Cassandra's allies find out, she's at the pack hospital. She's vulnerable." "She isn't there anymore," Kael interrupted smoothly, his tone brokering no argument. "While you were in surgery, I made some calls. I bypassed the pack's medical system entirely. Carmen was transferred by private medical helicopter 3 hours ago." I stared at him, stunned. "Transferred where?" "To Providence St. Vincent Medical Center in Portland," Kyle said firmly. "It's one of the best human cardiovascular facilities in the country. She is under the direct private care of Dr. Philip Rosenthal, the chief of cardiology. I paid for the next 5 years of her treatments up front, out of my private unshared accounts. 2 of my most elite trusted enforcers are standing guard outside her ICU door in human guise. Cassandra, or anyone loyal to her, will never get within 100 miles of your sister again." Relief, so profound and absolute that it made me dizzy, washed over me. For the first time since I was 18 years old, the crushing weight of my sister's mortality was lifted off my shoulders. I looked at the Alpha, really looked at him, The man who was supposed to be a ruthless warlord had just moved heaven and earth for a broken servant he barely knew. "Why are you doing this, Alpha Kael?" I whispered. Kael slowly sat back down on the edge of the bed. He reached out and gently brushed a stray lock of hair away from my forehead. His touch sent a strange, warm spark down my spine, a feeling completely alien to my suppressed wolf. "Because I'm a blind fool," Kyle said softly, his grey eyes locked onto mine, swirling with an emotion so intense it took my breath away. Cassandra and I. We were an arranged pairing, a political alliance forged by her father and my predecessor. I thought the pack bond we shared was all there was to a mate. I thought the dull, functional partnership was normal. He leaned closer, his voice dropping to a low, intimate timbre. But tonight, when the bleach and the artificial perfumes were gone, when I smelled your blood, Maeve, my wolf nearly tore its way out of my chest. He gently took my hand again, pressing it over his heart. I could feel the powerful, rapid thumping against his chest. I didn't go feral just because a pack member was injured, Kael confessed, his golden eyes flashing briefly in the dim light. I went feral because someone was hurting my true mate. The words hung in the sterile air of the pack clinic, heavy and vibrating with ancient magic. True mate. For my entire life I had been taught that the moon goddess paired wolves with perfect precision, but I had never dared to dream that the terrifying, untouchable alpha of the Redwood Valley pack was meant for me. My suppressed wolf, dormant and trembling for 5 years, suddenly stirred. A profound, terrifying warmth began to spread from where Kyle's hand rested over mine, chasing away the lingering icy bite of the silver. "Kyle," I breathed, the name feeling foreign and intimately heavy on my tongue. "But the bond, you and Cassandra, was political," Kael growled softly, though his thumb stroked my knuckles with absolute reverence. "A chosen mating, forged by my predecessor and alpha rider of the Olympic Peninsula pack. We performed the ceremonial bite, yes, but our souls never clicked. I thought my inner wolf was just naturally solitary. I thought the hollowness in my chest was the price of leadership. I didn't know I was simply waiting for the girl with the scent of rainstorms and wild heather to drop a tray of champagne so I could finally see her." Tears streamed down my face, not from pain, but from a profound, shattering sense of relief. For the first time in my life, I wasn't carrying the weight of the world alone. The next 3 weeks were a grueling crucible of physical and emotional recovery. The silver extraction had been successful, but the damage to my back was extensive. I was moved from the clinic to the Alpha's private wing of the estate, a sprawling, sunlit suite overlooking the dense, mist-shrouded Douglas firs of the Oregon mountains. Kyle rarely left my side. He moved his desk into my bedroom, managing pack affairs, territorial disputes, and the pack's lumber exports from a leather armchair while I slept. He fed me ice chips when the fever returned, and he personally applied the soothing, pungent herbal salves Dr. Harrison prescribed, his massive hands trembling every time he had to touch the jagged, raised scars Cassandra had left behind. "They will fade, Maeve," Kael murmured one evening, his golden eyes dark with lingering guilt as he carefully wrapped fresh bandages around my torso. "Dr. Harrison says the silver is completely purged. The skin will heal. The scars won't," I said quietly, looking down at my hand. Kael stopped. He leaned over, gently tipping my chin up so I was forced to look into his eyes. Then I will spend the rest of my life kissing every single one of them until you realize they are proof of your absolute unbreakable strength. You survived a monster to save your sister. You are the strongest wolf in this territory. My wolf purred, a sound I hadn't made in years. The mate bond was knitting itself together, a tether of golden light connecting my battered soul to his immense protective aura. But outside our sanctuary, a massive political storm was brewing. Cassandra was rotting in the subterranean, silver-lined holding cells beneath. The estate, Kael had completely locked down the territory. The visiting alphas from the Blood Moon Gala had returned to their respective territories with wild tales of Kael's feral shift and the Luna's disgrace. The inevitable retaliation arrived on a freezing Tuesday morning. I was sitting in a plush armchair by the window, wrapped in one of Kael's thick woolen sweaters, watching the heavy Oregon rain lash against the glass. The door to the suite opened, and Kael walked in. His jaw was set like granite, his shoulders rigid. The relaxed, gentle mate who had been reading to me the night before was gone. The ruthless alpha warlord had returned. "He's here," Kael said, his voice a low, dangerous rumble. I didn't need to ask who. Alpha rider of the Olympic Peninsula Pack, Cassandra's father. He brought 80 of his finest vanguard warriors, Kael continued, crossing the room to the heavy oak wardrobe. He began pulling out his tactical combat gear. They are staged just across the Columbia River Gorge border. He is demanding an immediate parley. He wants his daughter returned, and he is demanding my head for breaking the ceremonial pack bond and disgracing his bloodline. Panic seized my chest. 80 warriors. The Redwood pack was strong, but a war would mean catastrophic casualties. Kael, you can't fight him. If he wants her back, let her go. Exile her. Just let it be over. Kael strapped a heavy hunting knife to his thigh, his eyes flashing gold. I am not handing a criminal over to be coddled and hidden away, Maeve. Pack law is absolute. She tortured a pack member with silver. She embezzled millions from the medical welfare fund. If I let her walk away, I am telling every wolf in North America that the Redwood pack is weak and that the wealthy can abuse the vulnerable without consequence. He walked over to me, kneeling in front of my chair. He took my face in his hands. I am going to the border to meet him. I am going to hold a public tribunal under the open sky. And I am going to end this. Let me come with you, I blurted out. Kael frowned, his thumb brushing my cheek. Maeve, no. You are still healing. Ryder is a brutal, manipulative old wolf. The energy at the border will be volatile. She was my abuser, Kael, I said, my voice hardening. The timid, broken servant girl was gone, burned away by the silver and replaced by the emerging spirit of a true Luna. She used my sister. She carved her initials into my back. If you are putting her on trial, my face is the one she needs to see when the gavel falls. Kael stared at me for a long moment. He felt the shift in my aura through our developing bond. The fierce, unyielding resolve in my eyes mirrored his own. A slow, deeply proud smile spread across his face. "Get dressed, my Luna," he whispered. "We have a war to prevent." The rain had reduced to a heavy, freezing mist by the time Kael's black SUV convoy reached the clearing near the Columbia River Gorge. The roaring rapids of the river provided a deafening, chaotic soundtrack to the tension in the air. On the north side of the clearing stood Alpha Rider. He was a massive, scarred brute of a man with thinning grey hair and a sneer permanently etched onto his face. Behind him, 80 heavily armed, fully shifted wolves paced the tree line, their snarls carrying over the wind. On our side, Kael had brought only 20 enforcers. He didn't want a war. He wanted a legal execution. I stepped out of the SUV, the bitter wind biting at my face. I was wearing a thick, high-collared black coat, standing just slightly behind Kael's right shoulder. My heart hammered against my ribs, but the steady, overwhelming warmth radiating from Kael's presence kept my panic at bay. 2 redwood guards dragged Cassandra out of the back of a heavily armored transport van. She looked nothing like the golden Luna. Her blonde hair was matted, her designer clothes were stained and torn, and the silver-lined cuffs on her wrists kept her weak and shivering. "Cassandra!" Alpha Rider roared, stepping forward. His eyes locked onto Kael with murderous intent. "You feral, honorless cur! You break the sacred bond. You lock my flesh and blood in a dungeon, and you dare bring her to me in chains. I bring her to you to face the justice of the goddess Rider." Kael projected his voice, the Alpha command rolling over the clearing like thunder. "Your daughter is a sadist, a thief, and a traitor to the packet she swore to protect." Ryder spat on the muddy ground. "Lies constructed by a weak Alpha who couldn't control his own territory. She is a Luna. Whatever discipline she meted out to your pathetic, unruly servants was her divine right." "Discipline?" Kael's voice dropped, vibrating with lethal intent. He gestured to his lead enforcer, who stepped forward carrying a long, flat metal lockbox. The enforcer opened it, revealing the leather riding crop with the jagged, blood-stained silver wires woven into the tip. A collective, horrified murmur rippled through the ranks of Ryder's own warriors. In the werewolf world, using refined silver on another wolf was considered the ultimate taboo, a violation of the moon goddess's sacred laws akin to using chemical weapons. "This is what your daughter used to discipline an innocent Omega," Kael snarled, holding the whip up for all to see. "She used this to carve up the back of my true mate." Ryder's eyes widened momentarily, completely caught off guard by the mention of a true mate, but he quickly recovered, his face flushing dark red. "A true mate? You expect me to believe you magically found a true mate the moment you got bored of my daughter? It's a convenient excuse to sever a political alliance you no longer found profitable. And as for the silver, it's a forgery. You planted it to frame her." Cassandra, sensing an opening, fell to her knees in the mud, weeping hysterically. "He's lying, father. The servant seduced him. She attacked me first. I was only defending myself. Please, don't let him kill me." "Trial by combat," Ryder bellowed, his fangs descending as his muscles bulked. "You have slandered my bloodline, Kael. I challenge you for the life of my daughter and the honor of the Olympic Peninsula Pack. If I win, I take Cassandra, I take this territory, and I execute your little whore myself." Kael didn't even blink. He let out a low, terrifying laugh that made the hairs on my arm stand up. "You don't want a trial by combat, Ryder. You want a distraction because you know exactly what your daughter is. Kael snapped his fingers. Another enforcer stepped forward, handing Kael a thick, waterproof manila folder. Providence St. Vincent Medical Center, Kael read aloud, tossing the folder onto the muddy ground between them. Bank statements, routing numbers, and offshore accounts traced back to the Cayman Islands. Your daughter didn't just torture my mate. She embezzled $4.2 million from the Redwood Valley Medical Welfare Fund. She stole from sick pups, injured warriors, and dying elders. Kael took a step forward, his golden eyes blazing, his alpha aura exploding outward with such catastrophic force that several of Ryder's frontline warriors whimpered and dropped to their bellies. But here is the most interesting part, Ryder, Kael said, his voice cutting through the roaring wind. 2 million of those stolen funds were wired directly into the operational accounts of the Olympic Peninsula Pack. She was funneling my pack's money to fund your private army. Dead silence fell over the gorge. Even the river seemed to quiet down. Ryder froze. The blood drained from his face. He looked at the folder in the mud, then at Cassandra, who was violently shaking her head, sobbing, completely exposed. The murmurs among Ryder's warriors turned into angry, confused growls. Loyalty to an alpha was absolute, but stealing from sick children to buy weapons was a line no honorable wolf would cross. Ryder realized in an instant that if he fought Kael now, his own men might not back him. He had been backed into an inescapable, humiliating corner. Ryder looked at his daughter, his eyes devoid of any paternal warmth. He saw only a liability, a failed asset. She acted alone, Ryder lied, his voice tight, trying to salvage his own reign. I knew nothing of these stolen funds. If she brought corrupted money into my territory, she deceived me as well. Father, no! Cassandra shrieked, scrambling toward him, her chains rattling. You knew. You told me to bleed them dry. You promised. Silence, rogue, Ryder roared, backhanding his own daughter across the face so hard she collapsed into the mud, unconscious. He looked back at Kael, his chest heaving. She is broken. She is disgraced. She is no longer of my bloodline. The Olympic Peninsula Pack washes its hands of her. Keep the thief. Execute her. I care not. Without another word, Alpha Ryder turned his back on his daughter, shifted into a massive grizzled timber wolf, and sprinted into the tree line. His warriors, disgusted and demoralized, quickly followed suit. The threat of war vanished like smoke in the wind. Kael watched them go, his expression unreadable. He turned back to the unconscious form of his former mate lying in the mud. Take her to the high mountain prison in Deschutes County. Kael ordered his enforcers, his voice hollow. She will spend the rest of her miserable, extended life in a silver-lined cell, paying back every cent she stole in manual labor. As the guards hauled Cassandra away for the final time, Kael turned to me. The feral, terrifying warlord vanished, replaced by the man who had slept in a chair beside my bed for 3 weeks. He closed the distance between us, wrapping his arms around my waist and pulling me flush against his chest. It's over, he whispered into my hair, the tension finally leaving his massive frame. The monster is gone. Your sister is safe. You are safe. I buried my face in his chest, inhaling the deep, comforting scent of pine and ozone. My wolf, finally free from the chains of fear and submission, howled in joyous harmony with his. I wasn't just safe, I was home. They say the moon goddess doesn't make mistakes, but she certainly demands a high price for her miracles. My back will forever bear the jagged, criss-crossing scars of Cassandra's silver whip. But when I look in the mirror now, I don't see the broken, terrified servant girl who bled in silence to keep her sister alive. I see a survivor. I see a warrior. Today, Carmen is thriving, her new pacemaker allowing her to run through the redwood forests with the youngest pups of the pack. The medical funds have been restored, and the pack is stronger and more united than ever. As I stand on the balcony of the Alpha estate, Kael's strong arms wrapping around me from behind, his lips pressing a gentle, reverent kiss against the worst scar on my shoulder, I know the truth. I didn't just survive the Golden Luna's cruelty. I shattered her cage, claimed my true mate, and took my rightful place at his side.